Now on BBC Radio 4, our afternoon reading, and the last in the series Summer Ghosts. It's Off to the Park in Swings by Adam Thorpe.
He wondered if he had the right to call it a day. They'd played 5 games and were halfway through the 6th, and nothing good could happen to him now. They were all steaming in Ron's new tacked-on conservatory with its hibiscus, balsams, and a gaudy one called a Congo cockatoo. They should have been in the garden, but a pleasant breeze had played havoc with the lolly, and even the chance cards had ended up in the gardenia beds. Howard was a wheelbarrow man, had trundled round the board with an uncanny ability to miss desirable properties, and, as usual, he'd bought into stations and utilities. A fella of habit, he was. Well, they all were, although their annual pub crawl was a shadow of its former self. Last year, starting from the Browns, the Lord Nelson in Old Kent Road, they'd fizzled out in Northumberland Avenue. Bloody Ian Glossop, a virtual stretcher case. That was age. He tilted his chair back and regarded the other players with fake bonhomie. Lunch had been the usual microwave nosh. As for drink, the various 6-packs of lager were history. He was about a tenner down, win some, lose some. He needed a breath of fresh air. Howard declared himself a bankrupt. I might take a mosey around the park. They all looked at him. Is that prudent? Said Trevor. The park was either 10 minutes further from the street than it used to be when he was living here, in the days when he and Ron were next-door neighbours, Diane and Sandra nattering over the wall, or he walked a lot slower. What's more, he'd be pushing Peter's pushchair or going at the speed of Lily's 4-year-old legs. No excuses. It was a 69-year-old's puff, this one. He paused at the gate. He hadn't been back since. He loved this place once. Bird spotting, courting, then the kids. Know when to stay in jail, he muttered as he walked in, taking his mind off. He'd lost about 15 quid, he reckoned, totting it all up. But now he was under the summer trees, rustling in the breeze. He strolled around the duck pond, remembering. Peter in the pushchair still, and Lily scampering about. It hadn't changed. Not much in 4 decades. He'd quite enjoyed living here. How many years was it before they moved to Harlow? 5, 6? The ducks flapped and quacked, but there was no one with him to squeal and point. He'd brought them here every Sunday, while Diane did a bit for the Baptists. Life went so quickly, and now the kids were into their second marriages, and he was one of those oldies he'd never thought he'd become, all woolly coats and tender skin, except that it was summer and he was in shorts. A big mistake. Gnarled calves, varicose veins. He took a circuit up to the bowling green on the edge of the park. He remembered telling Lily, when she'd asked what lay behind the first row of houses, "More houses, sweetheart." His children were thousands of miles away now. Miami, Auckland. No grandkids either. Diane was dead and gone. He was glad he'd come to the park. Why be prudent? Being prudent hadn't got him very far, had it? 15 quid down. It was Ron who took the gambles, buying up everything he landed on, going for broke. Prudent. It applied to life, too. Ron and his conservatory, his open-top BMW, his South American holidays, women probably. Sandra had been a looker, knew it, smuggling peanuts under her blouse. Good days. Diane laughing. He heard kids' laughter, like an echo. Round the corner, alongside the path, there were swings, a slide, a climbing frame in a little paddock, mums and dads of all colours and their safe, fenced-in toddlers. That was new. What about the old pair of swings? Maybe they were still there, or maybe not. He'd take a peep. Just a peep. He went up the slope between the laurel hedges, a little out of the way the old swings were, which is why he'd liked the spot. A spread of turf, the trees just behind, deep in bracken. He was puffed. He cleared the laurel and saw it. Just the frame, in long grass. 6 rusty legs and a horizontal bar, walking to nowhere. Just the old blue frame had survived, blistery with corrosion. He positioned himself where he would stand, facing Lily on the swing. It always made ugly faces as she came squealing towards him, and then he'd give her a little shove to set her swinging back again. Tick-tock, tick-tock, the chains creaking and squeaking, time passing, the frame a touch loose in its bolts. Peter gurgling in the pushchair. She'd loved that. So had he, for some reason. He crouched stiffly and stuck his tongue out and growled, "The gobble monster!" A woman with a dog suddenly appeared, striding through the long grass on the far side, and she was startled to see his grimace, though it was not meant for her. She hurried off. There was a creaking, a squeaking, and a creaking. Faint. Was there? He stood exactly where he'd stood long ago, when pushing his daughter, and cocked an ear. Tinnitus, from too many turbo engines on the runway yards from his ears, that's what it was. Ron said he ought to get a hearing aid. Not on your Nelly, Ron. I prefer catching only half of what you say. Squeak. Then a creak. Then a squeak. Creak then, was it? Squeak? Tick-tock? Trees can creak like that. And he looked behind him at the brackeny clump of trees. Still a dark place. Something bumped his shins. Ouch! He took a step backwards. Then something hit his chest. He shouted out what you'd never shout in front of the kids, all but falling over as he stumbled away. He knew what it was had hit his chest. A tiddly pair of shoes. The creaking was longer in duration now, with a little skip in it at the apex of the arc that the swing was making. Except there wasn't a swing. Just the empty frame. He wanted to run, but couldn't. He took hold of the frame's nearest upright and stood there, mouth wide open. Broad daylight, blue sky, but his head was moving from side to side, following the squeak, the creak, the squeak with his eyes. He didn't dare walk in front to see if he'd get hit again. It would have been like walking in front of a plane. So what he did was, he leaned close, hand on the flaking blue upright. "I'm sorry, little girl. I'm so sorry." What was her name now? Susan, Sarah. Then he remembered it in a flash. The creaking stopped. He didn't know where to look. That was the worst. He was waiting for it, the little cold hand in his. It was waving about, looking for his own hand to tug, but he got both of his hands clamped under his armpits. Parky. It suddenly turned Parky. A rustle in the bracken under the trees. He looked there. Butterflies flickering about in the spots of sunlight. A cloud of midges, a thrush. Bracken fronds. It was a very good thing indeed, saying sorry. He'd always believed that. His chest felt bruised. "Sorry!" he shouted towards the dark clump of trees, knee-deep in bracken. There was no response. Butterflies, spots of sunlight, fronds nodding in the breeze. They were in the garden, on the lawn. They all looked up. "Have a nice stroll, Howard." They were finished with the game. They started on the gin and tonics, the miserable git society. He slumped into a deck chair. "I saw her. I bloody did." "Eh?" "I saw Sally Beeswick." Gary, who was quite new, said, "Who's she?" "Little girl what was done away with," said Ron. "In the park at tea time, August 1971. We advised you not to go, Howard." "You look very pale," said Ian. "As if he's seen a ghost," said Colin. Howard said he hadn't really seen her, visually speaking. He explained, spreading his hands. At the end, Trevor asked him what that mark was on his hand. He looked. A smudge of blue. "So what was you doing that afternoon precisely, Howard?" chuckled Gary. Quite a joker was Gary, but that one fell flat as a pancake. He was too young at 58. They poured Howard a double G&T, and he explained to the new boy what had happened. The others stayed respectfully silent, though they'd heard it a dozen times over the years. "The thing is, I loved taking the kids up there on the swings, but I couldn't stand the creaking and the squeaking. It was the council's job, but that's just it. Oh, it's too simple, isn't it? They'd have replaced the swings with a brand new set using our money, paper money to them. So I took it upon myself. Grease, wheel-bearing grease, state-of-the-art, safe from high thermal exposure and wet. Hey presto. Silent as a lamb." "He was an aircraft mechanic," explained Trevor. "The next day," continued Howard, "Sally Beeswick disappears, later found dead. On the swings 1 minute, slipping off into the trees the next. Naughty that was, because even at 5 years old, she knew it was wrong, slipping off like that into the bracken while her mum was deep in a book." Howard leaned forward in the deck chair and fixed Gary's eye. She, the mum, said to the papers how she'd never heard the swing stop. She would never have heard it start, would she? Because someone had greased it. Gary said, because he was new, "Well, that's confusing cause and effect, mate." The others chuckled. "She's still on them swings," Howard went on. "And they need more grease. 40 years of use." Trevor cleared his throat. They never did find the bloke, did they? Ian Glossop changed the subject. "We lost fair and square this time, eh, Howard? But it's only a game." "I'll drink to that," said Ron, who cleaned them out by 65 quid. Howard said, staring into his drink, "Win some, lose some. Win some, lose some." "That's the spirit," said Ron.
Kenneth Cranham was reading Swings by Adam Thorpe, and the series producer was Duncan Minshall.